Alright guys, so we're going to be doing a comparison video today between the Glock and the Steyr, as I promised in my previous Steyr video, okay? Not just because these are both, 9mm, 17+1, striker-fired polymer guns, not just because, like every other polymer gun on the market, the Steyr was inspired by the Glock, because let's be honest, the Glock was first, realistically speaking. Yes, I know there were other polymer frame guns, but on a mass level, the Glock was the first successful polymer frame striker-fired gun. But specifically because this gun was designed by the same people who designed this gun. Back in the late 90s when they were designing the Gen 3 Glocks, Glock hired a couple of Austrian guys who I'm not even going to pretend to be able to pronounce their names, you can Google it if you want, to do the redesign. And they wanted to make some pretty extensive changes, and Glock said no. They said, we want to address just a few key things because we don't want to redo our manufacturing and our tooling and all this stuff. So they made those few key changes from the Gen 2 to the Gen 3, and then they left Glock and they went to work for Steyr, and they designed the Steyr M9-A1, which is this gun with a slightly shorter barrel. This is the L9-A1. They also have a C9-A1 and an S9-A1, and they're all the same gun, just different sizes. Unlike Glock, they have 4 different sizes. This would be the largest, which is comparable to the 17. They have the M9A1, which is slightly shorter than this, really isn't comparable to anything Glock does. The C9A1 is their compact, and the S9A1 would be their subcompact. But we're comparing these two because they're the two that are most directly comparable, let's just say. So, that's kind of the backstory and why we're doing the comparison. Let's go ahead and jump into the comparison itself. Alright, so first off, let's just look at the overall, kind of size and exterior and shape and some of the features that you can see just by looking at the gun. Size-wise, both these guns are very comparable. The Glock is just a little bit longer, mainly because it's got this hump back here, which pushes out just a little bit. The Steyr comes back just a little bit and then pretty much goes almost straight down. Then we also have this piece right here that goes up and into the gun for the web of your hand, unlike the Glock has, and what that basically creates is a low bore axis. So you can get your hand up higher on the Steyr than you can on the Glock, so it gets the bore of the gun, it gets the barrel and the chamber down closer to your hand, which, I mean, isn't really an issue on a 9mm, but it does make it a little more controllable, a little more manageable. Sights themselves, you can see the sight comparison. We got the triangle sights on the Steyr, we got the ball and cup sights on the Glock. The Glock frame is a little bit thicker, but the Steyr slide is a little bit thicker than the Glocks. Okay, but other than that, pretty similar there. We can see we've got similar little cuts in here for a rail. We've got 2 slots instead of 1 like on the Glock as far as the slide goes. Squared off slide on the Glock. We've got a couple of angled cuts here on the sides of the Steyr, plus we've got front serrations on the Steyr as well. Both have finger grooves. Technically the Steyr only has 1 finger groove, the Glock has 2, but overall fairly similar. Okay, so now let's talk about the weight of these two guns here. So we'll put this here on the table, go ahead and turn it on, and we'll do the weight of the Glock first. Everybody should be fairly familiar to how much a Glock weighs. Let's take the magazines out of it. Got that. 22.6 ounces on the Glock. The Steyr, take the magazine out. 24.3, so just a little under 2 ounces heavier for the Steyr as opposed to the Glock. Now real quick, because I want to do the weight on the slides and the frames, because that's where the difference comes into play, but I want to show you the takedown on this. So as far as the Glock goes, everybody knows the takedown, right? Pull back, pull these 2 tabs, pull the trigger, slides off, right? That's how you disassemble those. With the Steyr, it's a little bit different. You've got a button here that you push in, and then you rotate this piece down, and then the slide just slides off. There's no one's better than the other or anything like that. It's just different designs. They're both very, very easy to take down. As far as the slide goes, on the Glock, 17.5 ounces. The slide on the Steyr, 15.8. So about an ounce and a half lighter on the Steyr. So we know that the gun itself is almost 2 ounces heavier, which means all the weight's going to be here in the frame there. So let's put the frame there for the Steyr. 8.5, so 8.5 ounces there, and on the Glock 5.55, so about 5 ounces, 5.5 ounces there. So this one's about 3 ounces heavier, and it's all in the frame. Now the reason for that, I'll show you here in just a second, but let's look at the Glock frame first. In the Glock frame, we've got all these pieces. We've got the rails, the trigger bar, all these pieces back here. These pieces are either pinned or they're kind of set into the mold of the polymer frame, right? That's how a Glock is designed, and that's pretty much what you go with. On this, they went with a little bit different design in that these rails right here are actually attached to an internal frame, kind of similar to like a SIG P250 or a P320 in that it's the internal frame. While it's not removable like on those guns, but it's that internal frame that's sunk into the polymer, and that's what all your pieces are attached to. That's what they're all pinned to. That's what they all lock into. Not into the polymer itself, but into this internal little frame, which adds rigidity, but it also adds weight. You can say that's good, that's bad. Technically, it makes it a little more durable, I guess. You know, I heard one person say, well, if you run over a Glock and you smash it, all these internal pieces will break, and then you got to buy all these pieces again, even if the frame itself is okay because it flexes back. I don't know how many people are going around running over their guns. I don't think it's a systemic problem or anything, but I guess technically this one would hold up better. The Steyr would hold up better to getting run over. But how about we just not run over our guns? That's probably preferable here, right? Outside of that, some other differences in here is the trigger bar itself. Now, this is going to be very easy to see on the Glock because it's all polished because I've had a trigger job done to this one. But you can see it attaches just to the right side of the trigger, goes back a little bit, goes up, goes this way, goes up again, and then comes straight back to the sear. It's all one piece with the sear. This trigger bar right here is just one piece of stamped steel, okay, that creates the piece from the trigger. This piece right here, which hits the plunger for the striker safety, comes back as the trigger bar, and it's also the sear itself. Okay, so this is all one piece. Now with the Steyr, they went with a different design. Now you're not going to be able to see it because it's all black in there, but maybe you can just a little bit. That's the trigger bar, okay? And it goes right here to the center of the trigger, and it just goes straight up at an angle back to here. And then we have a separate block of, you know, little milled piece that is your sear, okay? So for one, you've got a straight piece. Instead of it going back and up and then back again to the sear, it just goes directly from the trigger, slanted straight back to here. So it's kind of one of those, you know, what's the quickest point between, quickest way between 2 points is a straight line. They went with that design as opposed to what Glock had. The other thing I want to show you here on the slide, because the slides are very, very similar as you can see. Obviously there's a little less meat on the slide for the Steyr, but the main difference I want to talk about, and this is what we're going to talk about here in just a second, is the striker face itself. So the striker face on the Glock here is just a flat front face, right? It's just flat. On the Steyr, it's angled. It's cut at an angle, and that comes into play when we talk about the sears themselves, okay? So the sear back here on the Glock is just the flat end to this trigger bar. That's basically all it is. The sear on the Steyr is this angled piece right here, okay? That's where they come into contact with the striker. Now, I'm going to go ahead and kind of pull out some cardboard some cardboard examples of what I'm talking about here that I just cut out real quick before the video. This is a Glock trigger, or striker I should say, with the sear, and this is a Steyr striker with the sear. The difference is when you pull the trigger on a Glock, you're pushing this piece back and kind of cocking the striker just a little bit. You're pushing it back and down. So it basically pushes back and back and back until these two flat pieces kind of break apart from each other, and this goes flying forward and hits your cartridge. This is different in that when you pull the trigger on a Steyr, you're just kind of sliding these two pieces apart at an angle. So you're sliding these two pieces apart until they come apart and the striker goes forward. What that does is it makes for a nicer, cleaner braking trigger, period. I mean, there's no other way to say it. It is a redesign of the Glock, you know, trigger system, the sear, trigger bar, everything. It's a redesign that just makes the Steyr trigger better. To prove the point, I guess, not that you're here with me, guys, and you can tell for yourselves, but if you ever get a hold of one of these guns, you know, rack it back and pull the trigger. The fact of the matter is that this has a custom trigger in it. I've got extra parts in it. I've done a trigger job to this myself. It's much, much nicer than it was stock. And this trigger out of the box is far better than this custom Glock trigger, okay? And that's just a fact of the design. There's nothing you can do about it. You can spend all the money in the world on a Glock trigger, but unless it is a redesign of the trigger to where you have that slant face striker to sear connection like the Steyr has, you're never going to make a Glock trigger better than a Steyr trigger. You're just not. It's just a smoother, nicer, cleaner braking trigger. It's a lighter trigger. You know, it doesn't matter what you do to this, it's not going to be better than a Steyr trigger. It's just not, because it's a redesigned trigger. It's like saying you could somehow make a Glock trigger better than a 1911 trigger. Well, you just can't, because the way 1911s are designed, they're just inherently cleaner, lighter weight, smoother, cleaner braking triggers. That's just a fact of the design. Same thing goes here. So that is pretty much it, guys. those are the main differences between these two guns. They are both fantastic guns. Obviously, I own currently 4 Glocks and only 1 Steyr. I will say I like the Steyr a lot. I think, as I have said in previous videos, out of the box it is a better gun than Glock. It's just better made, better designed. Now part of that is because of Glock. They had Glock as an example to create this. So part of that credit to this being such a good gun is that Glock came first, and there's no doubt about it. And look, I'm not saying that a Steyr is a better option than a Glock. There's a lot of things that come along with Glocks, you know, in the fact that you have aftermarket parts, factory parts, OEM parts, magazines, accessories. There's so much out there for a Glock that something as simple as, well, yeah, this trigger's better, doesn't outweigh the benefits of buying a Glock. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is, this is a fantastic gun. Absolutely, hands down, this is a fantastic gun. And if you get a chance to pick one up, you won't regret it. But all in all, they're 2 fantastic guns. They're 2, in my mind, 2 of the best polymer guns you can possibly get your hands on. And you'd be lucky to have either one of them. And maybe even luckier to have both like me. So that's it. I'm going to get out of here. Thanks for watching. You got any questions, comments, anything like that, leave it down below, and we will talk to you guys later.